Okay, so now that we know where we're going with ratio analysis in this chapter, let's set things up a little more comprehensively with Continental and introduce a comparable that we want to compare to Continental, which is Southwest Airlines, ticker symbol LOVE. Southwest has not merged with anyone since 2008, so you can still go to Google Finance or Yahoo Finance and look up the company with its ticker symbol LUV. Okay, so starting with Continental. Continental, again, is what was considered and still would be considered a legacy airline, and it's characterized, the legacy airlines are characterized by two important things. First is they are what's called full service providers. In other words, they have economy, they have business class, they have first class, etc., etc. Southwest has only cattle car class, by contrast, and Continental has logistically what's called a hub and spoke system, which you see illustrated over here on the left. So, for example, if you wanted to go from somewhere in Arkansas to New York, you might fly from Arkansas to Continental's Cleveland hub and fly from its Cleveland hub to its Newark, New Jersey hub, and let's say actually you were going to Ithaca, New York, and then you would go from the Continental's Newark hub up to Ithaca, New York. So that's the idea of the hub and spoke logistics. And Love, on the other hand, as I said, is basic economy class only type airline. That was certainly true in 2008. That's changing a little now, but essentially still the same thing. And Love is characterized by point-to-point logistics. It has no big hubs where it's focused like a magnet pulling in all of its satellite flights. Continental just opportunistically leases slots at airports around the country as they become available in markets where it thinks it can make money, and makes a flight map between these points that looks something very much like the classic spider web for the spider that has taken some LSD, and you can Google that and see a very similar looking map for the spider web. Okay, so that's what we're going to be up to. We're going to be interested in looking at Continental, and in the back of our mind we're going to be thinking, should we be buying some of Continental's debt? Should we be buying some of its bonds? And we're going to use ratio analysis to help us with that. Ratio analysis looking historically at Continental and comparing it to Southwest Airlines. Okay. And we're going to look at the 5 major ratio analysis methods as we do this. The first is sales and sales growth. Second is margins. Third is turnover or efficiency ratios. Fourth is financial and operating leverage. And fifth is liquidity. So let's jump in right away with sales and sales growth ratios. As we know, sales and revenue mean the same thing. They're synonyms, okay? It's always good to look at an entity's sales because, again, sales is the cardinal measure of the size of a firm. And just very quickly right now, equity market capitalization is not a good measure of the size of the firm, because a firm, for example, with $1 billion of sales can have a balance sheet that has, like Apple, for example, virtually no debt, or it could have a balance sheet with 50% equity and 50% debt, and it would have the same sales, and the customers don't care what the balance sheet looks like. And so the measuring the size of a firm by the size of its equity market cap is useless. Okay. Also, we're going to see, and you'll see throughout your careers in finance, that many changes in performance are simply due to sales growth or decline. So you can answer a lot of questions about what's going on with a company just by looking at its sales and comparing its sales to that of its comps. So we're going to include sales and sales growth at the top of most of our ratio analysis reports. And that's exactly what we've got here on the next slide. So what I'd like to do is show you how this little bit of ratio analysis is formatted, how it works, and then we'll talk about the company's sales and their sales growth. For the rest of the chapter, you're going to see ratio analysis produced by a set of spreadsheets and databases that we use in the West End Advisors office. And the way that it works is in the rightmost column, we always show TTM information. TTM stands for 12 trailing months, and if a company is, let me just write that in, okay, so if a company is reporting quarterly, what's the 12 trailing months? Quarter 1 plus quarter 2 plus quarter 3 plus quarter 4, right? For flow information, like sales information. Okay, so always right-hand column is 12 trailing months. The next column over, working towards the left, is Q1. Q1 is the most recently reported quarter. Okay, and we're working quarterly with all these companies because they're required by the SEC to report their numbers quarterly. So that's pretty much going to be our standard. So we do go back 8 quarters or 2 years for any company that we're looking at. Okay, each row is either going to be a ratio or a quantity from the company's financial statements that we're interested in. So for example, the first row you see here is sales, and that's going to be sales for Continental, okay? You see up here, we say that we're analyzing Cal, and this second row is going to be for the comp, and what did we say our comp was? That's Love, okay? And down here, the next 2 rows are sales growth, and that's going to be again for Cal on the first line, and then Love on the second line. Okay, and now that we know how to read this, let's compare and contrast Continental's and Love's sales and sales growth. So what I like to do is start right away with TTM because I'm lazy, and that gives me just one column to have to think about. And in the past year, the past 4 quarters reported, Continental has reported almost 15 billion in sales, which is, of course, equal to what? It's equal to Q4 plus Q3 plus Q2 plus Q1, right? Because Sales is a flow quantity. Um, and same thing for love. We add up the past 4 quarters of sales, and we get for the past year about 10.5 billion. One quick question would be, in terms of sales, are these companies comparable? And the answer there is a resounding yes. It would be very hard to compare a company with annual sales of 15 billion to a company with annual sales of 50 million, say, for example. That would be a startup airline, and that would have very different economics. But in general, when you're talking sales in the billions range, as long as the two companies are of the same order of magnitude, they're certainly comparable. So in terms of sales, these two are in fact comparable. Sales growth, we look for each one, and again, looking at the TTM, so that means the sales in the most recent year have grown 10.3% over the sales in the prior year for Continental, and the sales for Southwest have grown by about 12%. So interestingly, sales, same order of magnitude, similar. They're similarly sized companies, and the sales growth on TTM basis is similar and healthy for both. Certainly 10, 11, 12% sales growth per year is nice and healthy. Okay, and I do want to show you how some of these quantities were computed. So let's take, first of all, let's take this 10.28% number for Continental of its annual sales growth, and let's see how I computed that number. Okay, so what I need is for the TTM sales, I'm going to write this out in words here. I need the most recent year's sales minus prior year's sales, okay, all of that over the prior year's sales. Okay, so that's what the TTM sales growth is by definition. And whoops, I need another little curly bracket in here just to make the algebra work out right. And so I have the most recent year's sales in the TTM column on the prior page. Here's my 14,957. But I don't have the prior year's totaled up. So I'm going to have to add 3.5 billion, 3.2 billion, 3.2 billion, 3.7 billion to get that prior year. So that's what I have here. So I have the most recent years minus the sum of the 4 quarters from the prior year divided by the sum of the 4 quarters from the prior year. And that gives me my 10.3%. Okay, now Q1 is actually a little tricky. Remember, the key thing here is that we need to remember that Continental is a seasonal company. So to compare quarterly growth, we're going to want to compare to get this 9% number, for example. What are we going to have to do? Just qualitatively, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to compare this quarter's sales to the prior quarter, the prior year, same quarter sales. Okay, so we want Q1 compared to the year ago quarter sales. So we need to compare the 4 billion number here to the 3.7 billion number here. And the way that we do that, now that we know what we're doing, it's very simple. It's just most recent minus prior, quantity divided by prior, and that gives us our 9% number. So it is very important that you are able to compute these ratios and understand their implications. Okay, when you're tested on this material, you're going to be tested on your ability to compute the ratios properly and to think about them a little and think about their meaning. Okay, clearly, if both of these growth numbers were, say, negative 20%, that would be unhealthy sales decline, right? So sort of obvious things like that. And while we're on the subject of obvious things like that, let's go quarter by quarter, just look a little more deeply at these companies. And if we compare Q4 growth over prior year's growth for Continental, we get about 9%, get about 11% for Southwest, and then next quarter up 12% versus 10 for Southwest, 12.3 versus 15. So both of them have solid, close to or double-digit sales growth on a quarter by quarter basis. So that's kind of nice. So we could say on Q, how about Y over Y quarterly basis? We could say each company's growth is also good. Okay, so that's that. So this quick look at just sales gives us a lot of great information about an entity we're interested in and a comp or a set of comps. Okay, so that's it for sales and sales growth. We're always going to do that, any entity that we look at. Next up is the type of ratio analysis called margin ratio analysis. Okay, so first of all, what is a margin ratio? A margin ratio is defined to be some income statement or cash flow statement quantity divided by another income statement or cash flow statement quantity. Okay, very frequently, margin ratio is some expense or earnings measure divided by sales. So these are both income statement numbers, so it'll be some income statement number divided by sales, the top number on the income statement. But cash flow statement numbers do come in sometimes too. Okay. Probably the most common and most important margin ratio is called the profit margin or the net income margin. We're still in accounting, finance land where things have 2, 3, 4, 5 different definitions. So at least 2 definitions you should know for profit margin are the profit margin itself and the alternate net income margin, defined to be net income over sales. So it's the bottom line of the income statement, the last line on the income statement, divided by the first line of the income statement. But so that's what it is mathematically, but for each of these ratios, we always want to think about what's the qualitative explanation for this, and why might it be important? What question is this ratio answering? Okay, and in this case, the question that is being answered here is how much net income was Continental or Love able to squeeze out of each dollar of sales that it generated. Okay, that also, I think, is an awesome piece of information to be able to know. So that's pretty exciting. So this is a very common, very important ratio. We also want to know for each of these ratios, and I'll try to fill it in where it's not written in for us. We want to know if bigger is better or smaller is better. Clearly, in this case, bigger is better because bigger means we're squeezing out more net income, more profit for each dollar of sales that we generate. Okay, so bigger is better for this ratio. Okay, and how can we, next thing we want to do with all of these ratios is now we want to completely forget our intuition and we just want to go back to elementary school when we're first looking at ratios and we want to answer the question algebraically, arithmetically, how could we increase this ratio? Clearly, we could increase the numerator, right? That would be by increasing net income. Okay, and alternately, again, just forgetting our intuition completely, we could reduce sales if we could keep net income constant, so we could decrease our denominator. And we'll see that both of these things could be effective, and both of them can be possible as we move on. And that's what we're going to look at next with our example of Vermont organic apples.